Our next speaker, Marko Huttunen, works at Levati Architects. He focuses on surveying and restoring the built heritage. He also lectures on vernacular architecture, timber structures, and restoration principles. He is a board member of ICOMOS, Finland. Please, Marko.
Thank you. And thank you for the organizers for this opportunity. So I work as a restoration architect and also as a restoration carpenter mainly on old timber structures. And apart from that, I'm also when we are talking about the medieval timber structures, I'm especially interested in the original medieval building site. Since in Finland we don't have any written documentation of the medieval times. The oldest ones are from the 17th century or so on. And so these structures are the only documents that we have from the original building site. A little bit about the history. In the medieval times, about 100 stone churches were started to build in Finland, and 70 of them still exist in Finland. At the same time, hundreds of timber churches were built, but all the medieval timber churches are gone. The churches built, they more or less follow the same concept, all of them. They are west-east oriented, they have a sacristy on the north side, they have weapons room on the south side, and the biggest difference is on the size. They are relatively big, the biggest ones are 40 meters long and more than 20 meters wide. So that's one interesting thing on the timber structures. They are rather, the span is rather long. So at that time we were part of the Kingdom of Sweden, and Finland was one diocese in Sweden. And the earliest stone churches, they had this flat ceiling, and the ceiling was nailed to the tie beam of the roof truss structure. But then there was a need to build the vaults in the middle of the 15th century, and in the soft stone areas in Middle Europe and elsewhere, the solution was just that you raise the walls and that's it. But in Finland, the stone walls are made out of granite, and it's very laborious to work with. So they made a new solution. They just cut the tie beam away, and what they have here is what we call rafter foot truss, and the rafter foot is the triangle there in the corner. And so some features, it's very lightweight. All the trunks are hewn according to the shape of the tree. So it can be something like maybe 30 centimeters in the lowest point, and the rafter on top maybe only 7 by 7 centimeters. So all the parts are getting thinner towards the tip, and as well as the forces are getting smaller. So it's a very economical structure. It's flexible structure, very slender, and it works with very simple wooden dowel joints, just a straight joint, and since it's so, and all the members and all the joints, they are just taking a compression, so it works in that way also very simply. And since it's so slender and the timber is very soft and thin, there are some doubts. One detail mentioned is that the compression area in the rafters is always in the middle, so that the rafters don't wind and things like that. Well, there are these, of course, vertical and horizontal forces, and they are taken to the ground by two ways. There is the friction between the sole piece and the wall plates, and then there is this ashlar post, and the lower part of the ashlar post is supported by the inner side of the inner wall plate. And that's how the forces go to the masonry. And on top of the masonry, we have like these two wall plates, and they are connected with these smaller tie beams. So they form like in a way a horizontal beam that's integrated to the masonry and makes the top of the masonry like rigid enough to take the forces. How do I go back? Oh, yeah. Was I there already? Oh, okay, maybe it's okay. This is a little bit of side story. Since this was developed to the stone churches, but it was used already in the medieval times also first in the like timber churches, and from there eventually it became kind of like the roof truss of Finland. So on every building types, from cities to farmhouses, and even today we are using it in some of our smaller new projects. And of course, in wooden churches, it works quite differently, since the walls are no longer rigid, but they're flexible. There is uneven support to the structure, the roof structure, and so it works differently, and has different kind of wooden joints. Now there is also tension, since the roof trusses, they work together with the log walls. And maybe even though this was originally kind of like created to stone churches in Middle Ages, it best worked in maybe 17th century wooden cruciform churches, where you can use like the attic space for the vaults, and it works like a one big knot, the whole thing. About the restoration then, there are some problems on the structure. They are quite big and quite lightweight. And as you can see on the left picture, there are some deformations on the structures quite often. And we have had a few projects where we have been both the designer on the site and doing the actual craftsman work. And what we of course try to do is that we don't do anything, and we mainly try to do the monitoring, thinking like what type of monitoring this project needs. And of course the new technologies we are using, but also I also always like to use something like the simple marks of the level that can be also like checked maybe 100 years later, when we don't know what kind of technology they have. But so that some architect or whoever after 100 years can enter the space and see our marks and understand what they mean, and could do the monitoring himself. But when we have to do something, of course it has to be reversible, and the important thing is of course to keep the clarity of the structure, and so that it's still is like a very flexible timber structure based on dowel joints. And we try to use also like medieval practices on the craftsmanship. Or kind of like I try to think also like if the medieval craftsman would have been here, he has this problem, what he would have done. I think it's... How do you go back? Nope. This is back. Okay. So at the moment we are having this project Medieval Timber Structures in Finland, and we have got a good funding for 5 years. This is our last year, and we have got some good results. And in the beginning we had this like, as we are going to survey and produce an overall picture of the structures. And the good thing is that we have only these 70 churches, and so it's possible to check them all in a way, so that we know now where are original medieval structures in Finland. And they are the only medieval wooden structures in Finland. Lucky in that sense. Another result is that, for example, this, because we are having conservation architects, engineer, archaeologists, even osteologists, architectural historian, and dendrochronologist. So one thing we've been doing is that we are reading the house marks that you can find in the medieval timber structures and compare them to later archives, from the 17th century, and we can see then who was building the church, the timber roof, and which houses delivered the timber and made the roof structures. That's one result. And reading the assembling marks, tool traces, numberings, we are trying to figure out how the churches were originally built and who built them again. And there are several marks that can tells about this system. And one interesting question that we don't know yet is that, Finland was one diocese, and it seems that at some point in the 15th century, from the diocese, there came this idea or some kind of a model how to build the churches of the 15th century, and also model for the roof truss, because they are all follow the same principle, they work the same way, but they are all built differently. So it was not made with the traveling craftsmen, but it was made by the locals. And they were built so that first the locals made the granite walls to the sidewall level, then the roof trusses were built, then the locals built the gable walls, and finally, probably a traveling craftsman came to do the brickwork, the vaults and the ornaments. One thing that I'm especially interested in these cases is also the doweling techniques. There are quite many. And I think why the local, mainly farmers, were able to build these is that, in Finland, at that time, all the farmers were able to do some kind of a woodwork, at least building their own house. But since these are on the coastline, they were also familiar with the shipbuilding techniques. So they knew how to lift heavy masts. Another one, we have been able to date the change in the roof structures. But we have two different churches that have been important with this. One is the Church of Pernaja, where it was originally erected in 1440, but then they changed the structure because they built the new walls inside, and that happened in 1450. And the Hamaran Church is another one. It was burned in 1440s, and then they rebuilt it in 1450s, and then in 1460 they built a choir there with the new technique. So we kind of are quite sure that the change happened in 1450, which is also new information in Finnish church history. And then finally, one result, maybe a bit unexpected, that we didn't know originally, was that quite a lot of the older, timber church structural members were used to build the roof trusses and also the scaffolding, of course. And you can find it there. And in some churches, there's a whole lot of this stuff, and we have been even able to reconstruct some of the previous churches that were there before the stone church. Okay, thank you.